Hello YouTube. It's been a long time since I last did a video. However, a lot of people have been asking me to come back and create some Laravel schemed videos of different sessions that we can look at. And I'm going to look at probably one of my strongest strengths first, which is API development, which I do on a daily basis in my work. And we're going to start looking at how we would create a API from the beginning all the way through to a production level API. We're going to start off with the basics, so anyone could start from these tutorials, from the beginning, and we'll work our way through to how do we structure our APIs into a more effective style of an API. In the beginning, it's probably going to look a little bit messy because we're going to follow just your normal way how most developers would start creating an API, and then we're going to go into how we could improve those APIs to make them a little bit more effective, a bit more readable, and etc. There will be a real world example that we're going to use, not from one of my work projects, but I've already created one that we'll be able to look at as script and then go from there. So without further ado, let's get started. So at the moment, you can see that I've just got a very basic Laravel project. If you're not too sure how to do it, you could quite easily just do composer, create project, Laravel, and then obviously the name of your project, which you can see down below. And that's the name of my project, as you can see up here. On the right-hand side, I've got Postman open if we're going to be using that during the series, which we probably are. We're going to be using that quite often. And obviously the IDE that I'm using is VS Code. The only extensions that I've got really on this project is just the Laravel basic stuff that you need, as a extension. Then a little bit extra stuff is I've got Postman inside VS Code. I normally use that myself, but I think it'd be a little bit harder for you to see whilst I'm doing videos, hence why I've put Postman on the right hand side so we can see it. And the other extension that I've got in the project is a way to have a look at SQLite databases. So this little package here, and we could just see what tables we have, whilst we're working through the project. So not much really in regards to extensions. It's very, 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 very basic. So just a very basic introduction into APIs. You'll also notice that we have no routes of API.php here. That's because in Laravel 11, they don't give us the ability to create APIs off the fly. You actually have to install the API functionality. And I'm going to show you how to do that now. So to install the Laravel API library, it's very straightforward. All we have to do is we're going to do PHP. So in our console, PHP install. Not sure if you can read that. It's a bit small. I couldn't work out how to make it any bigger. So artisan install. And then what we're wanting to install is the API. Now, if you're using something that is not Sanctum, so if you wanted to use, for example, something like Passport, you could abbreviate like this and then add Passport onto the API if you're going to do that. However, we're going to be using Sanctum, which is pretty much default with Laravel at the moment, so you don't really need to do much with that. So we can just install the API. This will obviously update what we need. It'll install Sanctum, as you can see here. I'll make it a little bit bigger so you can see, because obviously Sanctum is what handles all our tokens inside the system. And you'll notice that we now have an API.php directory in our routes directory. Now, if we try to do anything with this user, you'll notice that this would never work. So if we had to go into Postman, and in Postman, if we make a new request, and I've already got it here, which is fantastic. So because I'm using herd, you'll notice down here, I've got a directory called herd at the bottom. With herd, you are able to spin up websites dead easy. I would highly recommend it if you were using Windows or Mac. It's made my development process a lot more faster. And I've just noticed that there's something down here. I'm just going to say yes, and there you go. I just sorted out. So if we had to hit this endpoint, you'll notice that we'll just get an error. This is just our basic view that we'll see. because one, we have got no headers to do anything with JSON. So first we're going to do that. So we're going to say accept, and then application JSON. And then if we hit send again, you'll notice nothing changes because YouTube API test is just an HTML page. So again, nothing to worry about with that. If we prefix with API, which most things are, so if we hit send, you'll notice that we now have no route. And that's because if we had to do something simple like PHP artisan route list, like so, you can see that we have some GET requests here, and there's only one here for API user. And that's not referencing anything at the moment, and I'll soon show you why that is and how we can change those. But the only thing that we've actually got is this API user. So if we try and hit API/user, like so, and hit send, we should get an unauthenticated message. Now, the reason for this is obviously, one, this route is wrapped around a sanctum, which basically is saying we need a token or a bearer token, which most people are used to get access to that endpoint. So what happens if we don't want to use that? Well, we could make some endpoints that don't require any authentication, and that's pretty straightforward. We can do route and get, and with that get request, let's just say the parameter or the URL we're going to go to is test for now, just so we can see it working. And inside that, we can just put a function for now, and then inside that function, we can do some return statements on here. So we can do return, and we're going to return a response. If I can type response. And you can see that the response needs a content and a status. Now, remember, in the beginning of the video, I said we're going to do things dirty, and then we'll improve what it looks like later on with better coding standards, etc. But we want to first of all see how this all works. So the content we can pass, well, actually, we don't want to do that. We want to do a JSON. And then inside the JSON, we want to have some data. And let's just make a message inside the array. And with that message, we're going to say, hello, YouTube. And then obviously we just close that off like that. Now, if we had to have a look at the route list, so we can do route list. Oh, must be because I don't have a closing comma there. Let's have a look at the route list. You'll notice now we have a route here called API/test, and that is a GET request. And we know that in our Postman collection, we have a GET request, and here we have API and user. If we had to change that to test now and hit send, you'll notice we get a message back of hello YouTube of 200. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, well, where's that actual 200 coming from? Well, by default, you can see that this JSON here will always return a status code of 200. So if you ever wanted to pass in your own response code, like a 401, for example, you could quite easily just add that onto your JSON and hit send. And you'll notice we get 401, but we still get the same message. This makes no sense, obviously, if you're getting a response, but if it was 401, you'd normally get this unauthorized message that will come from Laravel itself as the API or sanctum. There are other ways that you could do this. You could use response client. Now, you'll have to forgive me, Laravel has so many facades with this, but I think it's this response. Nope, I've got the wrong one. I think it's just response. There you go, and HTTP OK. So we have loads of different responses here if you ever need to use them with all their response codes here, and you can just use a naming convention, which is a little bit more easier to read on the eye. And that's just using the HTTP facade with response, and you can just pass it in. So if we hit send on this, you can see we still get a 200 response because that's HTTP OK is 200, and we get our hello YouTube back. That is just a very quick overview for this session. It was just to show you how we could set up our environment to get ready with our API, setting up Postman to get that working, and how do we actually create our first route. In the next session, we'll be looking at extending this a little bit further to use things like post getting things about ID and etc. So we're going to expand a little bit more. And then we'll start looking at how to improve our coding a little bit better to make it a little bit more readable. Thank you for joining me on this session. I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Goodbye.